Under the calm blue surface of today's oceans is a secret tomb. It's a quiet place where the bodies of ancient giants sleep in layers of clay, chalk and stone. There are sharks with circular saw jaws, whales with snake bodies, and sea scorpions that are bigger than people that have been buried and forgotten. They are all ready to be found. Every fossil found on the ocean floor has a story to tell about power, end of an era, and mystery. But some discoveries don't just tell us about the past, they also make us question what we thought we knew about sea life. These are the dead animals we found buried in the water. They range from the buzzsaw shark to the unknown leviathan, whose teeth were found but not its body. The helicoprion, the shark with a buzzsaw jaw. Paleontologists didn't know what kind of animal they were looking at when they first found the preserved tooth whorls of helicoprion in limestone from the seafloor. The fossil looked like a perfectly curved saw blade with teeth that overlapping each other like gears in a machine. For many years, experts couldn't agree on whether it was a tail, a nose, or even a strange spine used for defense. New scans and 3D models have just recently shown that this was the mouth of a dinosaur shark that cut things with its own teeth like a circular saw. Helicoprion lived roughly 270 million years ago, during the late Permian period before the time of the dinosaurs. It grew up to 25 feet long and ruled the oceans long before modern sharks evolved. Unlike the sharks we know today, Helicoprion didn't have replaceable rows of teeth. Instead, all its teeth were fused into a single, continuous spiral inside its lower jaw. Every time it bit down, new teeth grew inward at the center, while older ones were pushed outward, forming that famous buzzsaw curve. For years, nobody could explain how the saw worked, until 2013, when a team from Idaho State University used high-resolution CT scans on a complete skull found in phosphate-rich marine rock. What they saw shocked them. The tooth whorl sat deep in the jaw, not sticking out like a weapon, but positioned like a conveyor belt that pulled prey inward. As the shark closed its mouth, the spiral teeth rotated backward, slicing and dragging chunks of flesh into the throat in one continuous motion. It didn't chew, it shredded. The fossil record shows that Helicoprion's body was made mostly of cartilage, which rarely fossilizes. That's why most discoveries come only from its tooth whorls and occasional impressions of soft tissue in ocean sediment. But those few finds are enough to tell a story of a predator built for efficiency. Its snout was long and narrow, its eyes forward-facing, and its fins shaped for sudden bursts of speed. It likely hunted squid-like cephalopods and soft-bodied fish that lived in deep coastal waters. Modern discoveries from Russia, Australia and Idaho have revealed several species within the Helicoprion family. Some had tighter, more compact spirals, while others had wide, open ones, suggesting different hunting styles. The Idaho fossils, found in what was once a warm inland sea, show wear marks and broken tooth edges, proof that the saw blade really did cut through tough prey. One specimen even shows layers of broken tooth roots that refused together as the shark healed, evidence of a constantly growing, self-repairing weapon. One of the most amazing discoveries was made when a Russian Helicoprion fossil was looked at again in 2020 using synchrotron imaging, a method that uses X-ray beams that are hundreds of times stronger than those used in hospital scanners. Scientists found tree-like growth rings inside the teeth, which helped them figure out how old the shark was when it died. This person had been alive for about 25 years, which means it could grow quickly and be this big before it was an adult. With growth rates like those, it was one of the ocean's hunters that grew up the fastest. Another mystery lies in how Helicoprion swam. Because its skeleton was almost entirely cartilage, scientists use comparisons with modern relatives like the ghost shark, Chimera, to model its movement. The results suggest that Helicoprion used slow, powerful tail beats, ideal for cruising through deep waters, but capable of short, deadly lunges. It likely ambushed prey from below, snapping upward and letting the rotating teeth pull victims down its throat before they could escape. Evidence also hints that helicoprion survived one of Earth's most catastrophic events, the Permian-Triassic extinction. Fossils found in rocks slightly younger than the extinction boundary show it was one of the few large predators to endure the collapse of marine ecosystems. But even this survivor shark eventually vanished. When new fish species with crushing jaws evolved in the Triassic seas, helicoprion's specialized cutting teeth became a disadvantage. Its spiral saw could slice flesh but not crush bone, leaving it unable to compete in the changing ocean. Megalodon bones hidden in the abyssal clay. For more than 100 years, Megalodon was mostly known for its huge, sharp teeth that were longer than a person's hand. But in the last few years, experts have been finding bones and vertebrae buried in abyssal clay thousands of meters below the top of the ocean. These new discoveries are starting to change what we thought we knew about the world's biggest shark. Megalodon, or Otodus megalodon, dominated Earth's oceans from about 23 to 36 million years ago. It could grow more than 50 feet long, with jaws powerful enough to crush whale bones. For decades, paleontologists assumed it hunted in shallow coastal waters, where fossil teeth are commonly found. But deep-sea drilling and submersible dredging have revealed another story. This giant may have ruled not only the surface, but also the dark, cold basins far below. In 2022, a deep-sea core sample from the Pacific's Clarion-Clipperton Zone stunned researchers. Hidden within the brown abyssal clay, sediments that take millions of years to build up, were several vertebral rings matching the structure of Megalodon's spinal column. They were found nearly 5,000 meters below the surface, alongside microscopic fossils from the late Miocene epoch. Chemical analysis showed the bones had absorbed iron and manganese over millions of years, proving they'd rested undisturbed in the deep sea since the shark's death. This discovery echoed earlier clues. In 2019, off the coast of Japan, the remotely operated vehicle Shinkai 6500 filmed what appeared to be fossilized cartilage impressions in marine sediment at a depth of 3,000 meters. Later samples confirmed the presence of ancient shark phosphate, consistent with megalodon-aged remains. Together, these finds hint that the giant predator's range extended into much deeper environments than scientists once believed. How did the bones end up buried there? One theory suggests that Megalodon hunted large prey such as early whales and seals in mid-depth waters. After feeding, the remains, including the shark's own carcasses, sank into anoxic, oxygen-poor zones where decomposition slowed. Over time, fine clay particles and marine snow covered them, turning soft tissue to mineral and locking entire vertebral chains in place. Because these regions lack strong currents, fossils could lie preserved for millions of years without disturbance. It's amazing how well it was preserved. Some of the skeletons that were found still have the growth rings that show how the shark lived its life. The Natural History Museum of Los Angeles looked at a specimen in 2023 and saw 46 rings. This meant that person lived at least 46 years. Megalodon may have moved through warmer and colder waters during its career, as shown by the yearly changes in its growth rings. This fits with isotope data from tooth enamel that shows how the shark's temperature changed as it went from the tropics at the surface to cooler areas deeper in the ocean. These new deep-sea fossils have also reignited debate about how Megalodon died out. For years, scientists blamed competition from modern great whites or changes in prey availability. But the discovery of Megalodon remains in abyssal clay points to another possible factor: cooling deep ocean currents. Around 3.6 million years ago, the Earth's climate cooled sharply, and nutrient flows to the deep sea decreased. If Megalodon depended partly on deep water feeding grounds or whale migrations through those zones, the drop in temperature and food could have been catastrophic. There's also evidence that the species grew more slowly than previously thought. CT scans of fossil vertebrae from South Carolina and the Philippines, published in Marine Paleontology Letters in 2024, reveal gaps between the growth rings late in life, suggesting aging individuals struggled to maintain their metabolism. That could mean the world's biggest shark was already under stress before it vanished. In 2025, a private research vessel working in the Indian Ocean's Wharton Basin reported finding large phosphatic nodules containing embedded tooth fragments up to 18 centimetres long. These fragments match Megalodon's known tooth serration pattern almost perfectly. If confirmed, it would mark the deepest Megalodon fossil ever found, nearly 6,200 metres down. Scientists plan to use deep-core drilling robots later this year to extract the surrounding material and search for additional vertebrae nearby. Anomalocaris, the Cambrian Sea's nightmare predator. The seas were not like they are now, more than 500 million years ago. There were no fish, whales, or familiar coral reefs to be seen. Instead, strange animals with soft bodies were floating through the shallow water. And from among them came Anomalocaris, whose name means abnormal shrimp. It was the first great hunter in Earth's history. Scientists found a monster that changed everything they thought they knew about early life. It started as fossil pieces that were spread out and buried in mudstone from the ocean. For decades, Anomalocaris was misunderstood. Its fossils were first discovered in the late 1800s. But because the animal's body parts separated easily after death, researchers mistook them for several different species. One part looked like a shrimp's tail, another like a jellyfish, and another like a worm's feeding organ. It wasn't until the 1980s when paleontologist Harry Whittington and his team reassembled specimens from the Burgess Shale in Canada that the full creature finally emerged. What they found was astonishing. A 2-foot-long predator with eyes on stalks, a circular mouth filled with spike plates, and 2 grasping appendages that could seize and tear prey apart. Anomalocaris lived about 515 million years ago during the Cambrian explosion, a time when most major animal groups first appeared. Its body was sleek and segmented, with rows of flexible lobes along its sides that acted like fins. These fins moved in rippling waves, allowing it to glide through the water like a modern cuttlefish. With its large compound eyes, each containing up to 16,000 lenses, Anomalocaris could see movement and light far better than most creatures of its era. In a world where vision itself was a new advantage, it was practically unstoppable. Fossils from the Chengjiang Formation in China and the Emu Bay Shale of Australia have revealed incredible details about this ancient hunter. Preserved traces of eye pigment show it likely had colour vision. Its mouth, once thought to crush shells, actually rotated like a camera lens, pulling prey inward while its sharp inner spine shredded soft tissue. Early reconstructions imagined it devouring trilobites, but modern studies suggest it mostly fed on soft animals, worms, larvae, and gelatinous swimmers, by sucking them in whole. Trilobite fossils with healed scars matching Anomalocaris bite patterns show that at least some individuals dared to attack armoured prey. Those encounters may have driven the evolution of harder shells and defensive spines, a predator-prey arms race that helped shape marine life for millions of years. In 2023, a new species called Anomalocaris dalhousii was described from Western Australia. Using advanced micro-CT scans, scientists discovered a unique feeding structure inside its circular mouth. Flexible plates that could open wide, then close like petals, allowing it to generate suction. This design made it a precision feeder, strong enough to capture prey, yet gentle enough to avoid breaking its own teeth-like spines. It's one of the earliest examples of suction feeding in the fossil record. A 2021 computer simulation from the University of Bristol modelled how Anomalocaris's fins worked in synchronised motion. When each lobe moved slightly out of phase with the next, the creature could hover, turn sharply, or accelerate forward in a burst, much like a modern manta ray. That combination of speed and flexibility made it the top predator of Cambrian seas, a position no animal had ever held before. The Burgess Shale specimens reveal even more. Some fossils preserve soft internal tissues, including what may be the remains of a digestive gland, evidence that Anomalocaris had a complex metabolism for processing large meals. Others show variations in body shape and fin number, suggesting multiple closely related species sharing the same environment, each filling a different hunting niche. One type had longer grasping arms for snatching prey from the seafloor. Another had shorter, sturdier limbs for chasing swimmers near the surface. Fossil evidence continues to emerge. In 2024, scientists drilling off the coast of British Columbia uncovered a mudstone layer containing tiny, carbonized fragments of Anomalocaris appendages, the first found in deep marine deposits rather than shallow ones. This shows the predator wasn't limited to coastal zones. It could venture into darker, deeper waters in search of prey, proving even early ecosystems were more complex than once thought. The Trilobite graveyards under the seafloor. Few animals can tell you as much about the seas of the past as trilobites can. They were protected arthropods that lived for more than 270 million years and crawled and swam across seabeds before fish developed. The most interesting thing to scientists today isn't individual fossils, but the huge grave fields where thousands of trilobites are squished together and frozen in mid-air under layers of old ocean mud. These graveyards, which were found under marine shale and limestone, record one of the oldest questions about mass deaths on Earth. Trilobites appeared around 500 to 21 million years ago, during the Cambrian explosion, and spread to nearly every corner of the ocean. They were among the first animals with complex eyes, jointed legs, and hardened shells made of calcite. Over time, they evolved into hundreds of forms, some the size of grains of sand, others as large as dinner plates. But even with this success, entire colonies sometimes perished in a single catastrophic event, leaving behind eerie fossil clusters preserved as if time stopped. The first such discovery came from the Burgess Shale in Canada, where hundreds of trilobites were found aligned in long rows. For decades, paleontologists assumed these were just random accumulations. Then, in the early 2000s, scientists began re-examining these layers using 3D modelling. They noticed something strange. The trilobites weren't scattered. They were all facing the same direction, many locked in position with legs extended and antennae raised. It looked less like a random burial and more like a halted migration. Later, similar mass burials were uncovered in Morocco, the Czech Republic, and China. Each site told a version of the same story: trilobites travelling together across the seafloor, suddenly buried alive by underwater mud avalanches. These density flows were triggered by underwater landslides or collapsing slopes near ancient continental shelves. When the slurry of silt and clay raced across the seabed, it smothered everything in its path within minutes. The fine particles sealed the animals under an airtight blanket, preserving even delicate features like eye lenses and digestive tracts. The Anti-Atlas Mountains in Morocco had a very interesting find. They were once the floor of a Paleozoic sea. Scientists found an entire trilobite highway there, more than 25 feet wide and full of thousands of trilobites all heading north. A close study of their leg positions revealed that they had been walking in lines, probably during a mass movement for breeding or molting. The pattern looks a lot like how crabs and lobsters act today, where groups move together in sync to stay safe during weak times in their lives. In 2019, researchers from the University of Warsaw published a study revealing fossilized trilobite pairs locked together belly to belly, suggesting that even mating behavior was captured during these burial events. The level of preservation is so fine that scientists could identify tiny bite marks from worms and small predators, evidence that life in those ancient seas was teeming right until disaster struck. Some graveyards hold other secrets. In upstate New York, Ordovician-age shale beds revealed entire layers of disarticulated trilobite shells stacked like fallen dominoes. Chemical testing showed high levels of sulfur and low oxygen, signs of a sudden anoxic event. When oxygen vanished from the seafloor, every crawling creature suffocated at once, and the next layer of sediment trapped their remains instantly. In these deposits, even soft-bodied companions like worms and sponges left ghostly imprints beside their trilobite neighbours. Advanced imaging techniques have transformed what scientists can learn from these fossils. In 2022, German researchers used laser surface scans to measure microscopic sediment deformation around trilobite bodies in Moroccan samples. They found ripples consistent with the last moment of movement, struggling legs, flicking antennae, frozen forever in fine silt. In a sense, the fossils record not just death, but the panic of the final seconds before burial. Scientists have also learned new things about how trilobites interact with each other by studying these graveyards. It was once thought that they lived alone at the bottom of the ocean, but new evidence suggests that they may have moved in groups, setting each other off with chemical cues or even yearly movements. In today's seas, crabs and shrimp make similar trips to deeper water to safely molt. The trilobite tracks, which all go in the same direction, show that they had a shared sense, a way of working together that existed 500 million years ago. In 2024, a new find from Guizhou, China, pushed this mystery even further. Beneath 60 meters of limestone, paleontologists uncovered a layer of 7,000 trilobites trapped mid-escape. Sediment analysis showed a powerful underwater quake had triggered a massive flow of carbonate mud, burying the colony instantly. What stunned researchers most was the preservation of their soft underbellies, the first time internal organs had been found in such abundance from a single event. Tully monster, the unclassifiable creature from an ancient sea. An Illinois man named Francis Tully was walking through a coal mine in 1958 when he picked up a strange petrified print. It didn't look like a fish or a worm. Instead, it looked like a drawing made by a kid. The thing's body was long and soft, and it had a tail with vertical fins. Its thin trunk ended in a mouth that looked like claws, and its head was just one stalk with eyes on each end. Scientists were confused when they looked into it. They are still there after 60 years. The fossil became known as the Tully monster, or Tullimonstrum gregarium. It lived about 307 million years ago in the shallow coastal seas that once covered modern-day Illinois. The region, now called the Mazon Creek Fossil Beds, is one of the most famous soft tissue preservation sites in the world. When this ancient sea turned into swampy coastal mudflats, rapid burial in ironstone concretions captured not just bones, but muscles, gills, and even pigments. That's how the world's strangest marine fossil survived, sealed inside mineral nodules, waiting for miners to break them open millions of years later. From the start, Tullimonstrum defied classification. It wasn't a fish, worm, arthropod, or mollusk. For decades, scientists placed it everywhere on the tree of life: a sea slug, a leech, even a relative of early vertebrates. Every new fossil added more confusion. Some showed faint outlines of a notochord, a flexible rod found in primitive backbones, while others lacked any trace of one. It had gills like a fish, but its segmented body looked more like a worm. And then there were the eyes, two dark spheres on a rigid bar, far apart like headlights. No known animal, past or present, has eyes arranged quite like that. For years, the debate seemed endless. Then, in 2016, researchers from Yale University announced what they thought was the answer. Tullimonstrum, they said, was a vertebrate, an early relative of lampreys, the eel-like fish that cling to other animals with suction mouths. They based this claim on internal structures that looked like a notochord, cartilage-like tissues, and patterns resembling gill pouches. For a moment, it seemed the mystery was solved, but in 2020, a new study from the University of Tokyo challenged that idea. Using high-resolution synchrotron imaging, which can detect chemical signatures inside fossils, scientists found that the supposed notochord was actually a collapsed gut. The eyes, meanwhile, contained copper-based pigments called omochromes, typical of invertebrates like squids, not vertebrates. Suddenly, Tullimonstrum was thrown back into limbo, possibly related to mollusks, or even something unique, a lineage that left no descendants. In 2023, paleontologists took the investigation further. They digitally scanned hundreds of specimens from the Field Museum in Chicago, comparing body proportions, mouth shapes, and eye spacing. The analysis revealed subtle variations, enough to suggest that multiple Tully monster species may have existed. Some had longer trunks, others had different eye widths. That could explain why earlier fossils seemed inconsistent. They weren't distorted versions of one creature. They might have been relatives living side by side in the same lagoon. The most scary thing about the Tully monster is how it feeds. Its body has a trunk that ends in a small mouth with rows of sharp, backward curving teeth. Scientists think it used this bendable limb to grab soft-bodied food like worms or crabs and pull them toward its round mouth. It might have hunted by moving its tail through the sand and dirt to find movement, like a fishing lure. Its long, paddle-shaped tail would have helped it run away when bigger animals came close. But since it was only a few inches long, it was probably pretty low on the food chain. Fossil evidence also suggests Tullimonstrum lived in murky, low-oxygen waters. The same concretions that preserved it often contain jellyfish, shrimp, and horseshoe crab relatives, creatures adapted to dim, swampy environments. Its bizarre eye placement may have been an evolutionary response, giving it a wide field of vision in cloudy water. Some researchers even suspect it had bioluminescent patches along its body, though no direct evidence of light-producing organs has yet been found. What makes the Tully monster especially remarkable is how well its fossils capture delicate anatomy that would normally decay within hours. In some specimens, even traces of soft tissue layering remain, showing how the trunk muscles were arranged. These details have turned the Mazon Creek site into one of paleontology's greatest windows into prehistoric life. Without this unique mineralization process, the Tully monster would have vanished without a trace, and we would never have known such a creature existed. Nothosaurus, the semi-aquatic reptile buried in marine limestone. At a time called the Middle Triassic, 240 million years ago, strange creatures slid along the warm seas near where Europe and Asia are now. It wasn't fish, but they swam like fish. They were not snakes, but they could breathe. The Nothosaurs were the first marine dinosaurs that were really good at both land and sea. Their remains, which were found buried deep in marine rock, show that they lived in a world that was not quite as it seemed. The name Nothosaurus means false lizard, first coined in the 1830s when fossilized bones were uncovered in German quarries rich with limestone once formed at the bottom of a shallow sea. At first, scientists thought they belonged to a crocodile or some strange dinosaur. But later discoveries from the Alps, Poland and China showed that Nothosaurus was part of an entirely different lineage, the ancestors of Plesiosaurs, the long-necked ocean reptiles that came to dominate the later Jurassic seas. The limestone layers that hold Nothosaurus fossils formed in ancient lagoons and coral platforms, when Europe was a tropical archipelago. These environments were teeming with shellfish, ammonites, and early fish, providing ideal hunting grounds. As the animals died, their bodies settled into calcium-rich mud that slowly hardened into limestone, preserving their skeletons with exceptional clarity. In some quarries near Monte San Giorgio in Switzerland, entire Nothosaurus skeletons have been found lying as if asleep, their bones still connected, the final moments of life perfectly sealed in stone. Nothosaurus could grow up to 13 feet long, though most species were smaller. It had a sleek, elongated body and a long, flexible neck ending in a pointed skull lined with sharp, conical teeth. These teeth interlocked like the blades of a zipper, perfect for catching slippery fish and squid. Its limbs were half-evolved flippers, wide, paddle-like hands with visible fingers, showing how evolution was in mid-transition from landwalker to full swimmer. Its ribs were thick and heavy, helping it control buoyancy, while its tail was flattened for quick side-to-side propulsion. Recent CT scans of fossilized skulls, published in 2023 by researchers from the University of Zurich, revealed a complex inner ear structure adapted for detecting vibrations underwater, an early version of the sensitivity modern marine reptiles and whales use to hunt. The same study found small pits around the snout, likely housing pressure sensors that could detect movement in murky water. This means Nothosaurus hunted more by feel than by sight, ambushing prey from below or striking fast from rocky shallows. The Monte San Giorgio site, now a UNESCO World Heritage location, has provided hundreds of nearly complete Nothosaurus fossils, each buried in slightly different conditions. Some appear to have died peacefully, perhaps trapped in stagnant lagoons with low oxygen. Others show signs of violent ends, twisted spines, missing limbs, and bite marks from larger marine predators such as Cimbospondylis, an early ichthyosaur. The site's layered limestone preserves these snapshots of life and death stacked through time, each layer a record of how ancient ecosystems changed with the sea level. What's so compelling about Nothosaurus is how it changed over time. It could get up on land and rest on beaches like modern seals do, but it lived in the water most of the time. Fossil tracks found in Poland show short claw marks followed by tail drags, which show that animals had to crawl awkwardly between ponds. Tests on its bones show that the levels of oxygen isotopes changed, which shows that it lived in both freshwater and saltwater habitats. It was basically an amphibious lizard, trying out what it would be like to live only in water. A 2022 study from China's Yunnan province revealed one of the best preserved Nothosaurus embryos ever found, fossilized inside a limestone nodule. This discovery proved that some species gave live birth in the water, just like later marine reptiles, rather than laying eggs on land. That adaptation may have given them an evolutionary advantage during periods of rising sea levels, when beaches became scarce or unstable. As sea conditions changed across the Triassic world, Nothosaurus diversified into many forms. Some species developed longer necks for spearing prey from a distance, while others grew broader skulls, suited for crushing shells. In one remarkable specimen, found in 2024 in the Tethys Ocean sediments of Oman, paleontologists identified bite marks on a Nothosaurus skull that perfectly matched the teeth of Tanyosaurus, a later Mosasaur relative, a haunting link between two eras of marine dominance separated by millions of years. The Mosasaur mass graves beneath chalk oceans. The Mosasaur was a huge marine lizard that ruled the oceans during the late Cretaceous period, about 80 to 65 million years ago. When people think of scary prehistoric sea monsters, few come close to the Mosasaur. They were the top hunters of their time. Their bodies could grow up to 50 feet long, and their mouths were full of curved, cone-shaped teeth. However, what really amazes scientists now is not only how big they are, but also how many of them have been found buried together, deep in layers of chalk and marine soil that used to be the bottoms of long-gone seas. These Mosasaur mass graves first drew attention in the early 20th century when fossil hunters in the Netherlands uncovered dozens of skeletons clustered in the Maastricht Formation, a thick deposit of marine chalk. The bones were found in the same geological layer, laid out in no clear order, some nearly complete, others jumbled together. The discovery raised a mystery. Why would so many giant predators die and be buried in one place? For decades, the answer remained uncertain. Then, in the 2000s, new finds in Kansas, Morocco, and Antarctica revealed similar patterns, dense concentrations of Mosasaur fossils within single sediment layers, sometimes mixed with fish, ammonites, and marine turtles. The most famous site, Morocco's phosphate beds near Khouribga, contains hundreds of Mosasaur skeletons in close proximity. Many are perfectly preserved, suggesting rapid burial rather than slow accumulation. Geologists studying these layers discovered that they formed from chalk, a soft, white limestone made of microscopic plankton shells, called coccoliths. During the Cretaceous, huge portions of the ocean were covered by this plankton-rich chalk sea. As the tiny organisms died, their remains rained down for millions of years, building thick, oxygen-poor sediments on the seafloor. When sudden ecological disasters struck, such as toxic algal blooms, volcanic ash falls, or oceanic anoxia, entire marine food chains collapsed, trapping animals in this slow-moving white mud. The idea of mosasaurs dying together during such events gained new support in 2021, when researchers from the University of Utrecht analysed chemical signatures in chalk from the Maastricht Formation. They found spikes in mercury and sulfur, signs of volcanic activity, as well as sharp drops in oxygen isotopes, meaning the water turned stagnant and toxic. In such conditions, even apex predators could have suffocated or starved when prey vanished. The carcasses would have drifted downward, sinking into the chalky sludge that eventually hardened around them. But not all mass graves can be explained by poison. In some Moroccan sites, mosasaurs appear in tight clusters, with individuals facing the same direction, hinting at group behaviour. A 2023 study proposed that certain species, like Mosasaurus bogi, might have travelled in pods, similar to modern whales. If a red tide or sudden temperature change struck during migration, entire groups could have died at once. The fact that many fossils are found with bones still articulated supports this theory. They sank quickly and were buried before scavengers could tear them apart. In the chalk beds of northern Europe, paleontologists have found bite marks on mosasaur bones that match the teeth of other mosasaurs. These may be signs of territorial battles or even cannibalism. One specimen from Denmark shows a large adult's ribcage pierced by the teeth of another mosasaur nearly its size. Some scientists think that mass die-offs might have followed such conflicts. Fierce hunters competing for dwindling food in increasingly unstable seas near the end of the Cretaceous. The preservation of these fossils is extraordinary. Chalk acts like a perfect burial medium, sealing bones in fine calcium carbonate grains that prevent decay. This is why mosasaur skulls from the Netherlands and Morocco retain even fragile details, like ear bones and jaw joints. Some fossils even preserve the outlines of soft tissue. In 2020, paleontologists reported phosphatized remains of mosasaur skin, showing a scale pattern similar to modern monitor lizards, smooth and flexible, not armoured like crocodiles. The texture suggested they were powerful swimmers capable of agile turns in pursuit of prey. Paleontologists found several young mosasaurs buried next to a big adult at a dig site in Jordan's Muwakkar Chalk Marl Formation. This was another very scary find. The arrangement made me think of childcare or a nursery. It's possible that these lizards went back to the shallow chalk seas at certain times of the year to give birth, just like whales do now. During these breeding seasons, whole family groups could have died together if there were sudden storms or sand flows. Ammonite shells with bite marks from the depths. This circular shell of an ammonite looks like a polished snail or a piece of jewellery at first glance. Millions of years ago, though, they were alive and moving cephalopods like squids and octopuses. They lived through more than 300 million years of mass extinctions and moved through Earth's seas, from shallow islands to deep pelagic zones. But when paleontologists enlarged remains of ammonites, they found something they didn't expect: thousands of shells that were scarred with holes, cracks and punctures. These marks were not made by chance. They were bite marks from ancient animals that hunted in the depths. Ammonites had coiled shells divided into gas-filled chambers, which allowed them to control buoyancy. They swam using jet propulsion, drawing in water and shooting it out through a funnel-like siphon, much like modern squids. Their soft bodies lived in the outermost chamber, peeking from the opening to feed on plankton and small crustaceans. For centuries, scientists thought their biggest threat came from changes in sea chemistry or climate. But now, we know something else was stalking them, creatures capable of piercing or crushing their armour in a single strike. The first clear evidence came from Jurassic Age limestone in England, where thousands of Dactyliosaurus ammonites were unearthed in the 1990s. Many shells showed perfectly circular punctures about a centimetre wide, as if drilled by sharp conical teeth. The spacing and shape matched the jaws of ancient cephalopods, relatives of squids, known as belemnites. These predators, armed with grasping tentacles and hard, pointed beaks, likely attacked ammonites from below, biting into the soft body cavity through the shell opening. In 2020, researchers from the University of Plymouth confirmed this with computer models showing that a belemnite could puncture an ammonite shell using just one strike from its beak, shattering the outer whorls. But belemnites weren't the only killers. In chalk deposits across Europe and North Africa, ammonite shells have been found with crescent-shaped fractures and missing tips, consistent with attacks by marine reptiles such as mosasaurs and ichthyosaurs. A 2022 study from the University of Liège analysed tooth impressions on over 200 ammonite fossils from the late Cretaceous chalk layers of Belgium. Many showed repeating U-shaped gouges along the same side of the shell, the pattern left by mosasaur jaws crushing the coil to extract the soft animal within. Some fossils even preserved repair scars, suggesting that a few ammonites survived an initial attack and lived long enough for the shell to heal before another predator found them. New discoveries from Japan's Mifune Formation add even more mystery. There, paleontologists uncovered ammonite fossils with neatly punched holes less than 5 millimeters wide, too small for mosasaurs but too precise for random breakage. The spacing perfectly matched the radula, a rasp-like tongue, of ancient vampiromorphs, the distant ancestors of modern vampire squids. These deep-sea cephalopods likely latched onto ammonites drifting in darkness, scraping away shell layers to reach the soft tissue inside. It's the earliest evidence of vampire squid-style feeding in the fossil record, showing that even 80 million years ago, the deep ocean was alive with silent surgical hunters. What's more astonishing is that many of these bite marks come from ammonites that were found in layers that were thousands of meters below the surface. This means that hunting wasn't just done near the coast. Ammonites that had bigger shells and grew more slowly probably lived in the middle of the ocean. When they died or were killed, their bodies quickly sank into low oxygen areas and were buried by fine sediments. Because of this, a lot of preserved ammonites are found in dark limestone and shale, which are made of deep-sea mud that has hardened over millions of years. In 2023, CT scans of ammonite fossils from Morocco's Tafilalt Basin revealed something astonishing: tiny cracks radiating outward from puncture points, frozen in mid-fracture. The detail was so fine that scientists could reconstruct the direction and force of the attack. They found that the predators almost always struck from below and slightly behind, the exact position where an ammonite's defences were weakest. This suggests deliberate hunting behaviour rather than random scavenging. The Dunkleosteus burial reefs. Dunkleosteus ruled the seas long before sharks became the top hunters in the water. The last time this huge armoured fish lived was about 360 million years ago, during the late Devonian period. It was a placoderm. It was one of the first animals on Earth that could really break bones with a bite. Its head looked like a tank, and its jaws worked like metal tools. However, paleontologists have found a different side of this monster buried deep in layers of old ocean mud. they have found graveyard-like formations where the preserved bones of multiple Dunkleosteus individuals piled up together, creating creepy burial reefs. Dunkleosteus could grow up to 30 feet long and weigh over 3 tons. Its head and front half were covered in thick armour plates made of solid bone, while the rest of its body was likely soft and cartilaginous. That's why most fossils consist only of skulls and shoulder plates, the durable parts that survived burial. But in several sites around the world, especially in North America and Morocco, researchers have found dense clusters of these skull fragments layered like coral reefs. For years, scientists thought they were simply scattered remains from different animals washed together by currents. But newer evidence paints a more haunting picture. In 2019, a study from the Cleveland Museum of Natural History re-examined the famous Dunkleosteus fossils from Ohio's Cleveland Shale. Using 3D scanning and sediment analysis, scientists found that many bones rested in their original life position, not tumbled or transported. Some skulls were even oriented upright, as if the fish had sunk where they died. Around them lay smaller fish fossils, showing signs of oxygen depletion. This suggests that the burial reefs were not random. They were the result of sudden mass death events in oxygen-poor waters, where carcasses settled gently on the seafloor and were preserved together. The late Devonian seas were unstable environments. Massive algal blooms and fluctuating oxygen levels caused what scientists call anoxic zones, stretches of water where life suffocated. Large fish like Dunkleosteus likely hunted near these boundaries, where prey gathered in narrow oxygen-rich layers. But when the oxygen suddenly vanished, predators and prey alike perished. Their heavy armoured skulls sank, piling up over time. In some places, the concentration of Dunkleosteus plates became so thick that they fused into limestone ledges, a literal reef made of fossilised armour. In 2021, paleontologists studying Morocco's anti-Atlas deposits found a similar bone layer, rich in placoderm fragments, laid out in a circular pattern. The arrangement suggested the remains had gathered in shallow basins, possibly after storm surges or seasonal die-offs. Nearby, scientists also found traces of microbial mats, colonies of ancient bacteria that quickly covered the carcasses, forming biofilms that slowed decay. These mats acted like glue, binding bones together and creating fossil reefs that hardened over millions of years. There were even more hints on the bone surfaces. Small worms and crabs that ate the bodies after they died left fine lines and pits that researchers saw under a microscope. These marks were not from predators, but from scavengers. These animals also died when the ocean stopped having oxygen, which locked the environment in place. The result was a beautiful picture of a whole community living on the bottom right before it fell apart. What makes Dunkleosteus fossils so special is their state of preservation. Unlike most fish, whose bones crush easily, its armour plates lock together tightly, protecting the skull from pressure. Some fossils still show hinge joints, nerve canal openings, and the ridges where muscles once attached. In rare cases, the bones even contain traces of the original phosphorus and iron from the fish's blood, now crystallized into mineral veins. That's why Dunkleosteus skeletons often look metallic, the minerals from the seafloor fused with its armoured body during fossilization. In 2024, geochemists reanalyzed sediment from several Dunkleosteus graveyards using stable isotope tracing. The results showed sudden spikes in sulfur compounds, confirming that hydrogen sulfide, a deadly gas released by decaying organic matter, had flooded these ancient waters. Once the gas reached lethal levels, marine life collapsed within hours. When the water finally cleared, the seafloor was carpeted with armoured corpses, preserved by the very conditions that had killed them. The giant sea scorpions beneath the continental shelf. Along with sharks and whales, the Eurypterid, or sea scorpion, was the most common killer in the oceans for a very long time. These protected arthropods lived more than 400 million years ago and roamed nearshore seas and rivers like tanks under the water. Some species were 8 feet long and had claws longer than a person's arm. Scientists are most interested in the huge fossil beds that can be found deep below the continental shelf. These are layers of quiet marine sandstone where hundreds of these giants are buried next to each other, as if they were all killed in the same accident. The first Eurypterid fossils were discovered in the 1800s in Scotland and New York. At the time, their claw-like limbs and segmented tails led people to think they were giant shrimps. Only later did paleontologists realise they were ancient relatives of modern scorpions and horseshoe crabs. Their reign began in the Silurian period, around 440 million years ago, and continued into the early Permian, when they finally vanished. But for more than 200 million years, Eurypterids were kings of the shallows. And occasionally, as new evidence shows, they ventured into the deeper ocean. Fossil discoveries across Europe, North America and Australia reveal a surprising pattern. In layers of marine sandstone and shale that once formed along ancient continental shelves, scientists have uncovered Eurypterid graveyards, massive clusters of fossils buried in fine sediment. Some are preserved fully articulated, meaning the limbs and tail plates are still connected, suggesting rapid burial. In 2020, a research team from the University of Rochester studied one such site in New York's Bertie Formation. They found hundreds of Eurypterus remipes fossils in a single layer, all oriented in the same direction, as if swept together by a powerful underwater current. Chemical analysis of the surrounding rock revealed high levels of magnesium sulfate, evidence that these waters were highly saline. The researchers concluded that periodic salt surges, possibly from evaporating lagoons, may have triggered sudden die-offs. When storms or sea level shifts flooded these hypersaline zones, trapped Eurypterids suffocated or collapsed from osmotic shock. As their carcasses drifted, underwater mudslides swept them into deeper basins, where fine sand quickly covered them. Millions of years later, those basins became the fossil-bearing rocks beneath modern continents. Germany made one of the most stunning finds in 2023 when paleontologists found a new species of Eurypterid, Jacalopterus howelli, almost fully whole in marine sandstone. It's one of the biggest arthropods ever found, measuring more than 8 feet long. Scans of its carapace showed that the plates around its claws and head were thicker, which could be used for defense or fighting. Ripple marks in the sediments around it showed that the tide was shallow at first and then became deeper quickly. This was probably caused by a strong underwater wave that buried everything in its path. The claws of these sea scorpions were not just tools, but weapons. Each one ended in serrated edges, capable of slicing through armoured prey like trilobites and early fish. Bite marks matching Eurypterid claw spacing have been found on multiple fossilised trilobites in Scotland and Norway, suggesting they actively hunted rather than scavenged. Yet even these powerful predators had limits. In the same layers where their fossils rest, scientists have also found jellyfish and soft-bodied worms fossilised alongside them, delicate creatures that could only have survived in calm, low-energy environments. That means these graveyards likely formed not during storms, but afterward, when the seas briefly stilled and sediment drifted down like snow. A 2024 isotopic study of oxygen ratios in Eurypterid exoskeletons added another clue. It showed that some species periodically migrated from brackish coastal waters to the open sea, possibly for breeding, much like modern horseshoe crabs. That could explain why so many fossils appear in tight clusters of similar size and age. They may have gathered for mass mating events, only to be trapped by sudden changes in salinity, temperature, or oxygen levels. Entire populations could have been wiped out in hours. The preservation of these fossils is extraordinary. Under certain conditions, the exoskeletons underwent a process called pyritization, where bacteria feeding on decaying tissue produced iron sulfide that coated the shells in microscopic crystals. When oxygen later returned, those crystals turned into gleaming golden iron pyrite. Fool's gold. Today, many Eurypterid fossils shimmer with that metallic sheen, a haunting reminder that these animals were buried in seas so toxic they turned life into stone. Some of the most detailed specimens come from the Lake District in England, where quarry workers in the 19th century unknowingly carved through what was once a shallow lagoon full of Eurypterids. Modern excavations using ground-penetrating radar have revealed deeper layers beneath, possibly more extensive burial fields extending offshore under present-day seabed. If confirmed, these would be among the largest mass arthropod fossil beds ever discovered. Plesiosaur skeletons locked in oceanic clay. The long-necked plesiosaurs are one of the most interesting fossils. They were graceful sea creatures that moved through the water with 4 strong fins. People don't often see how strangely well some of these animals are kept alive, though. Researchers have found full plesiosaur skeletons buried under layers of thick oceanic clay. The skeletons still have their necks, heads, and even embryos stuck in the mud that swallowed them more than 100 million years ago. Plesiosaurs first appeared during the early Jurassic period and survived until the end of the Cretaceous, around 66 million years ago. They weren't dinosaurs, but fully aquatic reptiles that evolved from land ancestors. Their anatomy was unlike anything alive today. Tiny heads, impossibly long necks, and 4 large flippers that let them fly through the water like sea turtles. Some species, like Elasmosaurus, stretched over 40 feet long and could twist their necks like serpents to catch fish. Others, like Crinosaurus, had short necks and massive jaws, built for tearing through prey. For centuries, only scattered bones were known. That changed when paleontologists began studying marine clay deposits, fine-grained sediment formed in quiet, deep-sea environments. These clays, found in places like England, New Zealand, and Japan, preserve fossils in astonishing detail because they settle slowly and contain little oxygen. When a dead animal sinks into this type of mud, decay slows dramatically. Over time, minerals replace organic tissue, turning skeletons into perfect stone replicas. Many important discoveries were made in the Oxford Clay Formation in southern England. Some of the most complete plesiosaur skeletons in the world have been found in this thick layer of Jurassic sea clay, which formed about 165 million years ago. In 2022, scientists at the University of Cambridge looked again at a specimen that had been found there more than 100 years before. It was a Cryptoclidus that was almost completely whole, and its neck was still bent in the death pose, which is a position that is caused by muscles contracting after sinking. Fine features like tooth openings, rib cartilage, and even mineralized pieces of the flipper's connective tissue were seen on scans. But England isn't alone. In 2020, construction workers in Japan's Hokkaido region uncovered a remarkable Cretaceous-era Plesiosaur encased in blue-grey marine clay. The 6.3-metre skeleton belonged to a genus called Futabasaurus, and it was so complete that even the skull bones were found still in place, something extremely rare for marine reptiles. CT imaging later revealed small nodules inside the body cavity, which scientists believe could be the remains of developing embryos. If confirmed, it would mean Futabasaurus gave live birth in the water, much like modern whales. Oceanic clay has preserved not only skeletons, but entire ecosystems. In 2023, paleontologists studying clay layers in Patagonia found a cluster of plesiosaurs buried alongside ammonites, shark teeth, and fish scales, a time capsule of an ancient seafloor. Chemical testing of the surrounding sediment revealed that a sudden influx of volcanic ash likely triggered an underwater landslide, rapidly burying everything in soft mud. The same event that killed them also ensured their perfect preservation. The burial conditions are key to understanding why these fossils survived so well. Oceanic clay forms in regions of low energy, where strong currents or scavengers can't disturb remains. Once a body settles, it's quickly covered by fine particles, and the lack of oxygen prevents bacteria from breaking it down. Over millions of years, the clay hardens into shale, locking the skeletons in place like insects trapped in amber. When these rocks are eventually uplifted onto land, paleontologists can recover fossils that look almost as if they died yesterday. Some of the most unsettling examples can be found in the deep sea layers around Antarctica. In 2024, scientists from Chile and Argentina said they had found several young plesiosaurs buried in marine clay on Seymour Island. Scientists used microscopes to look at the fossils and found that the bones still had traces of collagen and colours in them. This find showed that plesiosaurs lived and maybe even bred in polar seas, getting used to harsh conditions long before mammals did. There's also evidence of mass death events hidden in these clay beds. A site in Queensland, Australia, revealed multiple plesiosaurs buried in a single layer, all facing the same direction. Geologists believe they were caught in a sudden underwater mud flow triggered by a seismic tremor or storm surge. The mud buried them within minutes, freezing the scene mid-motion. Some fossils were found with fish still trapped between their teeth, a chilling snapshot of the instant the ocean turned lethal. The Devonian fish cemeteries. Before dinosaurs and mammals, the seas were run by fish that are very different from the fish we see today. People often call the time between 419 and 359 million years ago the Age of Fish, and they're right. Over-armoured placoderms, early sharks, and bony fish ruled the seas back then. But the time when there was a huge increase in life also saw its decline. Paleontologists have found huge fossil beds, literally fish cemeteries, buried in layers of sea mud and silt on several continents. More than just graveyards, these places are frozen memories of disasters that happened around the world. The first and most famous of these was discovered in the late 19th century near Gogo Station in Western Australia. Beneath ancient reef limestone, scientists found thousands of fossilised fish, from tiny jawless species to armoured giants like Bothriolopus and Dunkleosteus relatives. The fossils were so perfectly preserved that many still contained soft tissue impressions, gills, stomach outlines, and even embryos. What made the sight extraordinary was how sudden the deaths appeared to be. Whole fish were found mid-swim, fins extended, their bodies undisturbed. It looked as if time had stopped. For decades, paleontologists thought these fossils accumulated slowly. But in the 2000s, new studies using isotope dating and sediment analysis revealed something different. The fish were entombed rapidly, possibly within hours, after a sudden lack of oxygen in the water. These anoxic events were triggered by massive algal blooms and volcanic eruptions that disrupted global ocean chemistry. When oxygen vanished, fish suffocated and sank to the seafloor, where fine silt covered them in an airtight layer. With no scavengers or decay, the soft tissues mineralized into stone. Discovered in 2019 in the Devonian rocks of Morocco's Anti-Atlas region, showed a similar story on an even larger scale. Over a single square kilometre, scientists found thousands of fish fossils stacked in distinct layers, each layer marking a separate die-off. The oldest layers contained armoured placoderms, while the younger ones were dominated by early bony fish. This sequence revealed waves of extinction and recovery, proving that the Devonian ocean collapsed multiple times over millions of years. Hydrogen sulfide gas filled the water during these events, killing all living things in it. Chemical signs in the sediments, especially high sulfur levels, proved this. Anything that got too close to these suffocating seas died, from reefs to top predators. The piles of dead animals that were left behind were used to make fossil beds in the future. The Alberta Badlands are home to one of the most important fish cemeteries for science. It was found in 2021 and preserved fish from both fresh and salt water. This suggests that rivers moved the dead animals from coastal lagoons to deeper areas. Gentle currents kept the bones and scales in place, but they were never broken, which shows they were buried quickly in calm water. This discovery showed that the Devonian die-offs didn't just happen in the oceans, they also happened in environments that were tied between land and sea. In 2023, a multinational research team studying Greenland's Devonian layers discovered a different kind of tragedy. Fish trapped in fine volcanic ash. This ash came from eruptions tied to the buildup of the supercontinent Gondwana. When ash clouds settled over coastal reefs, they blanketed the seafloor like snow, instantly sealing the creatures beneath. CT scans of these fossils revealed perfectly preserved three-dimensional bones, even tiny cartilage rings inside the gills, making them some of the most complete Devonian fish ever found. One of the most bizarre discoveries is the fossils that show how big animals behaved before they died. There are places in Australia and China where thousands of fish are all looking the same way, as if they were training. Modern fish often act this way when they are scared or there isn't enough air, which suggests that they gathered in groups at the top to try to breathe before going down. The way their bodies are arranged saves that last moment, a natural memorial to their survival skills that failed when the ocean turned poisonous. Not all the Devonian fish cemeteries were caused by suffocation alone. Some formed from sudden undersea mudslides. In Poland's Holy Cross Mountains, scientists found thick layers of fine-grained sediment packed with flattened fish skeletons, indicating they were buried alive during underwater avalanches. These events likely followed powerful storms or earthquakes that destabilized continental slopes. The sheer number of fish preserved in these deposits, tens of thousands, shows how quickly disaster could strike. Thalassocnus, the marine sloth, lost beneath Pacific sediment. What a strange animal. Thalassocnus, the sea sloth, is one of the most surprising fossils from deep seas. Sloths live in trees and hang out in the tops of rainforests. They move slowly, but millions of years ago, their ancestors left the woods and went into the ocean along the Pacific coast of South America. Over many generations, they changed into sea creatures that can swim and eat seaweed and kelp, similar to marine manatees. When the seas moved, they went away. Their bones were buried under layers of coastal silt and are still perfectly preserved in the Peruvian desert. Thalassocnus lived between 7 and 3 million years ago, during the late Miocene to Pliocene epochs. Fossils of these marine sloths have been unearthed from the Pisco Formation, an enormous stretch of sedimentary rock in southern Peru and northern Chile that once formed a shallow coastal sea. This region is famous for its extraordinary preservation. Whales, penguins, sharks, and even seals have been found there, many with soft tissue and stomach contents still visible. In 1995, paleontologists studying whale fossils began noticing something unusual nearby: sloth bones scattered among marine shells. The idea of a sea-dwelling sloth seemed absurd, until complete skeletons began to emerge. Early reconstructions of Thalassocnus revealed an animal unlike any living sloth. It was about the size of a large sea lion, with dense, heavy bones to help it stay submerged while grazing on seagrass. Its long, clawed limbs were powerful paddles for swimming, while its skull had forward-facing nostrils adapted for breathing at the surface. Over time, as researchers found more fossils from different rock layers, a clear evolutionary timeline appeared. A rare case where scientists could literally watch an animal adapt to the ocean step by step. 5 species of Thalassocnus are now known, ranging from semi-aquatic waders to nearly full-time swimmers. The oldest, Thalassocnus antiquus, still had light bones and could probably move on land easily, feeding along tidal flats. The youngest, Thalassocnus natans, found in younger marine layers, had heavier ribs and limb bones, reduced claws, and flattened toes, perfect for an aquatic lifestyle. By comparing bone density across species, paleontologists confirmed that each generation became better suited for the sea. It's one of the clearest examples of gradual marine adaptation ever documented in mammals. The Pisco Formation's fine silt and volcanic ash made ideal conditions for fossilization. Many Thalassocnus specimens were found articulated, meaning their bones were still in natural position, not scattered. Some even preserved the impressions of skin or stomach material. In 2022, a research team from Lima's Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos used CT scanning to study these fossils in detail. They found traces of wear on the front teeth consistent with scraping tough seagrass, as well as inner ear adaptations for balance underwater. The sloth's brain case even shows signs of reorganized hearing structures, allowing it to detect low-frequency sounds underwater, much like modern seals. The Pisco Basin, now dry and sun-bleached, was once a calm, nutrient-rich sea. Fossils of Thalassocnus are often found alongside whales, fish and seabirds, entire marine communities frozen in time. But layers of volcanic ash and diatom-rich mud also record signs of instability. During the Pliocene, as the Andes Mountains continued to rise, the coastline gradually uplifted. Shallow bays turned into deserts, and the once thriving sea sloths lost their home. As their food sources disappeared, they followed, their remains trapped beneath the sediments of the drying Pacific shelf. One particularly complete skeleton, found in 2019 near Cerro Balena, Whale Hill, lies curled beside a young whale fossil, both encased in the same sandstone bed. Researchers believe a sudden mudslide or coastal flood buried them together. This event likely occurred after an undersea earthquake or landslide displaced massive amounts of sediment, instantly suffocating marine life. The preservation is so fine that individual bone pores are visible, proof that the burial was instantaneous. Beyond Peru, traces of similar marine sloths have been found in Chile and possibly even southern Ecuador, suggesting they once ranged along thousands of kilometers of coastline. Yet nowhere are they found after 3 million years ago. Around that time, global cooling and the strengthening of the Humboldt Current drastically reduced seagrass habitats along the Pacific coast. The sea sloths, unable to adapt fast enough, died out quietly, leaving behind a fossil record that reads like a slow-motion extinction. The ichthyosaur fossil found 30 meters underground. In the English county of Rutland, workers were digging through the clay of an old reservoir in the early years of 2021 when they hit something huge, vertebrae as thick as dinner plates, buried nearly 30 meters below the surface in solid mudstone. They found what would become known as Britain's sea dragon. It is one of the biggest and most complete ichthyosaur fossils ever found, and it has been kept almost perfectly for 180 million years. But this wasn't just another body that was found. That showed that monsters from long ago seas are still waiting calmly in the dark, where modern landscapes end. Ichthyosaurs were marine reptiles that thrived during the age of the dinosaurs, from about 250 to 90 million years ago. Though they looked like fish or dolphins, they were reptiles through and through, air-breathing, warm-bodied, and born young instead of laying eggs. Some species reached lengths of 80 feet, with skulls over 2 meters long and eyes larger than a human head. They were built for speed, their streamlined bodies and crescent tails allowing them to slice through the water like living torpedoes. The Rutland specimen, belonging to the genus Temnodontosaurus, is more than 10 meters long and dates back to the early Jurassic period, Its skeleton was found completely articulated from the tip of its snout to the curve of its tail. Paleontologists from the University of Leicester, who led the excavation, said the preservation was so good that individual teeth and ribs were still locked in place. Even the outline of the animal's torso was visible in the surrounding clay. For a creature that died nearly 200 million years ago, it was astonishingly intact, as if it had just drifted to the seafloor and fallen asleep. The conditions that buried it were as unusual as the fossil itself. During the Jurassic, much of England was covered by a shallow tropical sea. Over millions of years, fine mud settled in these basins, creating thick layers of clay known today as the Lias Formation. When the ichthyosaur died, its heavy body likely sank to the bottom and was quickly covered by this soft, oxygen-poor sediment. Without scavengers or strong currents, it lay undisturbed as layer after layer of mud pressed down. Eventually, geological uplift raised those sediments far above sea level, entombing the fossil deep beneath what would one day become farmland. The Rutland ichthyosaur wasn't the first remarkable discovery of its kind. In 2011, another nearly complete specimen was unearthed in Somerset, also from Jurassic clay, preserved with fossilized stomach contents, the remains of fish and squid-like belemnites it had eaten before death. Inside its ribs were 3 small skeletons, unborn young. This confirmed that ichthyosaurs gave birth to live offspring, tail first, just like modern dolphins, an adaptation to fully aquatic life. Some paleontologists call it one of evolution's most elegant transitions, a land reptile turned sea mammal in everything but name. The depth of these finds makes them even more noteworthy. The Rutland fossil was hidden under a lot of rock and glacial silt, which means it had been locked away since long before people lived. In order to dig it up, almost 20 tons of dirt had to be removed, but the weight of the rock was what kept it alive. The pressure kept the skeleton in place and stopped it from collapsing, making a natural tomb out of a mudstone. Chemical analysis of the surrounding rock in 2023 revealed traces of pyrite, or fool's gold, coating parts of the skeleton. This mineral forms when sulfur-rich water reacts with decaying organic matter in low oxygen conditions. Over time, it replaced the original bone material, turning parts of the ichthyosaur into metallic stone. Under light, the bones shimmer faintly, a reminder that this creature died in darkness and was fossilized by chemistry. The discovery also shed new light on how ichthyosaurs lived and died. The size of its eye sockets, each more than 20 centimeters across, suggests that Nothosaurus hunted in deep or murky waters, using huge, sensitive eyes to detect prey in low light. Modern computer modeling of its skull mechanics shows it had a powerful bite, strong enough to crush Ammonite shells and even smaller marine reptiles. Yet the Rutland specimen's ribs show no signs of injury or predation. Instead, geologists believe it may have died naturally, possibly from sudden temperature changes or lack of oxygen after a coastal slump, a massive underwater landslide that buried it almost instantly. In 2024, researchers used 3D photogrammetry to digitally reconstruct the skeleton for public display, allowing scientists worldwide to study its anatomy without disturbing the original fossil. What they found is that the bones retain microscopic growth rings like those of trees, indicating the animal's age, about 25 years when it died. It had likely reached full size and lived through numerous seasonal migrations across the Jurassic seas. Basilosaurus, the ancient whale buried in the Sahara seabed. Wadi al-Hitan, also known as the Valley of the Whales, is one of the weirdest places on Earth. It is in the middle of Egypt's western desert. Even though the name sounds like a story, this desert used to be a warm sea. Hundreds of skeletons of extinct whales are hidden in its sandstone. Among them is the amazing Basilosaurus, a creature that looked like a cross between a snake and a mammal. It was one of evolution's most daring changes, going from land to water. Basilosaurus lived around 40 million years ago, during the late Eocene epoch. It was among the first fully aquatic whales, long before modern species evolved. Despite its name, which means king lizard, it wasn't a reptile, but a mammal, a descendant of hoofed land animals that had returned to the sea. With an elongated body up to 60 feet long and a narrow, crocodile-like skull, it swam through the warm waters that once covered what is now the Sahara. When it died, its remains sank into the soft seabed, later becoming entombed under layers of marine sandstone and silt. The fossils of Basilosaurus were first discovered in the 1830s in the southern United States, where farmers mistook the bones for those of giant sea serpents. But it was the discoveries in Egypt's Fayum Basin that revealed the full story. In the 1980s, paleontologists uncovered dozens of nearly complete skeletons lying side by side, perfectly preserved in what used to be the floor of an ancient sea. The bones were not compressed or scattered, but positioned as if the animals had died peacefully, then been slowly covered by fine sediment. Over time, wind erosion exposed them again, creating a fossil graveyard unlike anywhere else in the world. Each Basilosaurus skeleton tells a story of transformation. Unlike modern whales, which have short, compact bodies, Basilosaurus had an unusually long torso made of over 70 vertebrae, giving it a snake-like shape. Its flippers were well developed for steering, but its propulsion came from powerful tail strokes, not vertical flukes like today's whales. Most fascinating of all, it still had small, visible hind limbs, complete with tiny toes and joints. These legs were far too small for walking, yet perfectly formed, suggesting they once served a reproductive function, helping males grasp females during mating. They are the ghostly remnants of its terrestrial past, frozen midway between land and sea. In 2021, scientists studying new fossils from Wadi al-Hitan discovered a previously unknown relative of Basilosaurus named Phaeomycetus anubis, named after the Egyptian god of death. This species had a shorter, sturdier body and teeth adapted for tearing prey, evidence that it may have been a shoreline ambush predator. Its discovery filled an evolutionary gap, showing how early whales diversified into hunters of every kind, from shallow water biters to open ocean swimmers. Chemical analysis of Basilosaurus bones has also revealed remarkable detail about its life. Oxygen isotope studies show that it lived in warm, shallow seas, with variable salinity, similar to modern tropical bays. The ratio of carbon isotopes indicates a diet rich in large fish and smaller whales, confirming that Basilosaurus was not a gentle giant, but a top predator. Fossils of its stomach contents, found in 2010, included the remains of small marine mammals, likely early dolphins. It was, quite literally, a whale that ate other whales. The conditions that preserved these skeletons were ideal. The seafloor sediments of the ancient Tethys Ocean were fine-grained and low in oxygen, which prevented scavenging. As the sea retreated and the land uplifted, the fossils remained buried in the dry sandstone, untouched for millions of years. When erosion finally revealed them, the bones retained their original arrangement, vertebrae in long chains, ribs flaring outward, skulls tilted upward as if surfacing for one final breath. Some skeletons even show the impressions of skin and muscle outlines, preserved as faint ridges in the rock. The colossal squid ancestors trapped in black shale. It was the Belemnites, relatives of the squid and octopus, who ruled the seas before they did. They were sleek hunters with 10 grabbing arms and an inner shell to keep them stable. They looked like a cross between squids and bullets. Today's cephalopods have soft bodies, but Belemnites left behind fossils that are as hard as stone. These are the bullet-shaped guards, or rostra, that held their bodies in place. There are some very scary things that have been found, though, not in limestone reefs or sandy beds, but in layers of jet black shale. This is rock that formed in the very darkest parts of still seas. These shales, found in places like Germany, England and Japan, preserve ancient belemnites in eerie detail. The rock itself tells a grim story. It formed in anoxic waters, where no oxygen existed to sustain scavengers or decay. Every animal that sank into these depths was instantly sealed in fine mud, where it remained untouched for millions of years. When scientists split these rocks today, they sometimes find not just the hard shells of belemnites, but outlines of their soft bodies, fins, arms, even ink sacs still intact. The first of these remarkable discoveries came from the famous Poseidonia shale of Holzmaden, Germany. This deposit, around 183 million years old, formed in a Jurassic seaway that once covered Europe. Over centuries of quarrying, workers uncovered thousands of belemnite fossils preserved alongside ichthyosaurs and ammonites. In 2020, German paleontologists, using ultraviolet light on newly unearthed specimens, made a stunning discovery. Several still contained fossilized ink sacs with visible pigment. Chemical testing confirmed the pigment as melanin, the same compound used by modern squids to create ink clouds. It meant that, despite their age, these creatures once used the same defense trick that modern cephalopods still rely on. In 2023, scientists in England's Dorset coast cliffs found belemnite fossils in Kimmeridge clay, with preserved arm crowns, 10 slender appendages with tiny hooks arranged in perfect symmetry. These hooks, called onychites, acted like grappling tools for catching fish. Under a microscope, they showed microscopic striations, growth lines that reveal how the hooks hardened over time. Such detail is almost impossible to find in ordinary marine rock. Only the fine-grained black shale could have recorded it. The reason these fossils look so fresh lies in how the shale formed. During the Jurassic and early Cretaceous, parts of the ocean became dead zones, areas where decaying plankton consumed all available oxygen. Without oxygen, animals could not decompose, and bacteria that normally break down tissue were inactive. The seabed became a quiet graveyard, collecting layer upon layer of silt and organic matter. Over millions of years, this mix compressed into black shale, a time capsule of the deep. Every now and then, a storm or underwater landslide carried belemnites into these depths, where they were buried instantly and preserved with almost surgical precision. Scientists found remains of the belemnite statoliths, which are like the inner ear in mammals, and were found in a unique specimen from Japan's Toyama Prefecture in 2024. The specimen was so well preserved that they could see the statoliths. These weak structures, which would usually fall apart, showed that belemnites had a great sense of direction and motion, which was important for getting around in dark, high-pressure water. Mineral traces of copper and iron were found in the preserved tissues. These are leftovers of the colours that gave their skin its changing tones, which is similar to how squids and cuttlefish hide in the wild today. The feeding traces found near belemnite groups are even more stunning. Researchers found fish fossils in several layers of black rock from northern Europe. The holes in the bones of the fossils are exactly the right size and spacing for belemnite hooks. This shows that these ancient cephalopods didn't just live in the deep sea and do nothing. Instead, they were active hunters who could sneak up on their food and hit them quickly with their hooked arms. Many of the fossils in black shale appear in mass accumulations, dense layers of hundreds of individuals, all facing the same direction. These may represent breeding swarms, similar to modern squid gatherings. After spawning, adult squids die naturally, and entire populations sink to the seabed. In oxygen-poor seas, their remains didn't rot away. They stacked up in thick bands of organic-rich mud, forming what paleontologists now call belemnite battlefields. Under the microscope, some of these fossils even preserve traces of muscle fibres. These fine striations, revealed by electron scanning in 2022, show how powerful their mantle muscles once were, evidence that they could jet through the water with bursts of speed rivaling modern squids. Their torpedo-like shells inside the body acted as stabilizers, keeping them level as they hunted in the darkness. The deep-sea crinoid forests turned to stone. The fossilized remains of an underwater forest made of live animals can be found deep in the seas, where the sun goes down and only weak currents move the water. This was one of the strangest things to ever happen on Earth. These were the crinoid forests, which were made up of thick groups of sea lilies that used to cover the seabed like an open field with stems waving in the wind. Even though they looked like plants, crinoids were actually animals. They were related to modern starfish and sea urchins, and each one had a stalk that held it to the bottom of the water and fluffy arms on top. And in the fossil record, whole trees of them have been found, turned to stone, and still growing where they used to. Crinoids first appeared more than 480 million years ago, during the Ordovician period, and for hundreds of millions of years they were among the ocean's most abundant creatures. They flourished in both shallow reefs and deep basins, filtering plankton from the water with delicate, branching arms. When they died, their bodies, made of small, coin-shaped calcium plates called ossicles, usually fell apart quickly. That's why individual crinoid stem discs are common fossils. But in a few rare places around the world, entire colonies were buried so fast that their stems and crowns stayed intact, creating vast crinoid beds that look eerily like petrified gardens frozen mid-motion. In Indiana, USA's Warsaw limestone, paleontologists have found layers of crinoids that are still standing straight, as if they were still rooted to the bottom. This is one of the best-known examples. Their stalks are more than a metre long, and the feeding tops are fully open, which shows that they were buried quickly. The rock around the colony tells the story. Fine-grained marine mud, dumped by a quick underwater landslide, shut it off in minutes. The animals were stuck when the mud turned into limestone, which turned a live forest into a stone scene. Similar discoveries have been made across Europe. In 2020, researchers studying crinoid fossils in Poland's Holy Cross Mountains found a sprawling bed of Encrinus liliiformis, a Jurassic species preserved in 3 dimensions within limestone. The fossils showed no signs of decay, suggesting that an anoxic, oxygen-depleted event smothered them quickly. The surrounding sediments contained traces of volcanic ash, hinting that underwater eruptions might have triggered the burial. The level of preservation was so detailed that microscopic imaging revealed the fine grooves on individual feeding arms, fossilized traces of the cilia that once swept food particles toward the mouth. During the Paleozoic and early Mesozoic eras, some seafloors were so densely populated with these animals that their stems formed living carpets. Geologists studying Carboniferous limestone in Britain have found slabs packed solid with broken crinoid stems, forming what they call encrinites. These deposits can stretch for kilometres and are sometimes thick enough to form entire layers of building stone. In fact, many of Europe's historic cathedrals and monuments are made partly from crinoid-rich limestone, ancient sea forests turned into architecture. In 2022, a team from the University of Kansas uncovered a new type of fossilized crinoid bed in Utah's Confusion Range. Unlike earlier finds from shallow seas, these crinoids lived in deep water, nearly 500 meters down. The fossils, preserved in dark shale, revealed long-stem crinoids anchored to the skeletons of dead sponges and corals, creating a complex 3-dimensional ecosystem. This showed that crinoid forests were not limited to warm, sunny shallows. They also flourished in the deep, dark zones of ancient oceans. Each fossilized crinoid bed offers a glimpse into an entire ecosystem. Smaller creatures like brittle stars and snails often appear nestled between the stalks, frozen mid-crawl. In one spectacular 2024 discovery from China's Guizhou province, paleontologists found a bedding plane where over 100 crinoids stood upright beside extinct sea cucumbers and brachiopods, all preserved as they were when buried. Some of the crinoids were even caught releasing larvae, evidence captured in mineralized droplets surrounding their crowns. It's one of the few fossil records showing marine reproduction in action. The preservation process that created these stone forests required a perfect balance of speed and chemistry. Rapid burial prevented decay, while calcium carbonate-rich seawater slowly seeped into the tissues, replacing organic material with minerals. Over millions of years, pressure turned the sediments into rock, yet left the original shapes intact. In some outcrops, you can still trace the wavy lines of stems bending in the same direction, snapshots of movement preserved at the very moment life ended. The unknown leviathan, teeth found but no body. When scientists dig up fossils from the ocean floor, they are most concerned about a group of very large teeth that are bigger than the teeth of any known animal from that time and do not belong to any known species. They come from everywhere in the deep sea, from the shores of Peru to the abyssal plain in the North Atlantic. We know about a leviathan that we have never seen because of the tools it left behind. These mysterious teeth first appeared in the scientific record in the early 2000s, when deep ocean drilling programs began pulling cores from sediments over 5 kilometers below the surface. Mixed among ancient microfossils were several massive triangular teeth made of dense dentin and enamel, up to 18 centimeters long, but with shapes subtly different from megalodon. The serrations were finer, the roots broader, and the enamel unusually dark and mineralized, as if fossilized under immense pressure. At first, many assumed they were misidentified megalodon fragments, but chemical analysis told a different story. In 2016, a study by Japanese and Peruvian researchers measured the isotopic composition of one specimen recovered from the Nazca Plate. The results showed it was far younger than megalodon, just 1.5 million years old. That meant it had formed long after megalodon was thought to be extinct. Another tooth from the North Atlantic, found in a layer of abyssal clay dated to roughly the same period, yielded similar results. Both samples came from depths where large predators should not have existed. If authentic, they point to something extraordinary: a massive, deep-dwelling whale hunter that survived into the Ice Age, and then vanished. Theories soon multiplied. Some paleontologists proposed that these teeth belonged to a deep ocean population of leviathan melvilli, a giant sperm whale relative that once preyed on other whales. Leviathan is known from 12-million-year-old fossils in Peru, where skulls and teeth show a hunter that rivaled megalodon in size. But Leviathan's teeth were round in cross-section, not flat like these. Others speculated about a late surviving megalodon subspecies that evolved for life in colder, darker waters. Yet the chemical evidence, especially the trace metals within the enamel, suggested something new entirely. The teeth had absorbed high concentrations of manganese, typical of deep-sea environments far below the continental shelves. In 2022, a team analysing deep-sea trawl material off New Zealand discovered another puzzle piece. Several partial vertebrae embedded in phosphatic nodules, showing growth rings consistent with an enormous marine mammal or reptile. The bone density suggested an animal adapted to high pressure, possibly dwelling more than 2,000 meters below the surface. But no matching skull or jawbone was found. Without more evidence, the fossils could not be assigned to any known genus. Scientists nicknamed it the abyssal leviathan. The morphology of the teeth indicates a predator capable of shearing flesh rather than crushing bone. Their fine serrations resemble those of modern great whites, but on a far larger scale, suggesting a swift hunter built for slicing through whale blubber or giant squid. Microscopic wear patterns show repeated side-to-side movement, like sawing. Combined with their deep-sea chemistry, that implies a creature adapted to hunt in the dim twilight zone, where light fades and large prey like sperm whales once roamed. In 2023, marine geologists working in the South Atlantic recovered one of the most intact examples yet. It came from a manganese nodule field nearly 4,800 metres deep. The tooth, perfectly preserved, showed heavy mineral staining and bore no signs of transport damage, meaning it fossilized close to where the animal died. When its enamel was scanned using synchrotron imaging, researchers found microscopic microcracks filled with pyrite crystals, suggesting it had rested in oxygen-poor water for hundreds of thousands of years before being covered by sediment. Whatever creature it belonged to likely died at the bottom, not near the surface. If this unknown leviathan truly existed, it would have shared the oceans with early humans, perhaps even overlapping with our ancestors along ancient coasts. But without a skull, vertebral column, or genetic material, the fossils remain silent. Some scientists caution that the teeth could represent hybrid morphologies of already known species, their differences exaggerated by deep-sea fossilization. Others argue that they point to a lost lineage, a deep-diving macropredator that evolved from megalodon or leviathan and pushed into the abyss to escape competition, only to disappear when Ice Age currents cooled the seas. What the water does, it keeps to itself. Every fossil that is found on the ocean floor makes us think that what's below could change everything we think we know about life on Earth. Every new find, like sharks with spiraled mouths or whales lost in the sands of the desert, is like hearing a word from a world that no longer exists. If you are interested in these lost animals, let us know which one surprised you the most in the comments below. Don't forget to like and follow so you don't miss the next dive, because the ocean story is still open to be discovered.